Good evening and welcome to another edition of the Daily Deuce. I'm Gary Graves from just outside Louisville, Kentucky. And in Maryland, my good friend, esteemed colleague, John Webster. John, how are you doing this December evening?
Man, I'm doing great, Gary. Another great week and a weekend in sports. I'm totally excited to sit here and talk with you again. Before we get into it, let's say hey to the traffic cop, the director, the editor, John Pitt. How you doing?
Hey, I'm doing great, guys. I'm on vacation. I get to see Argentina play and the Dallas Cowboys every week. I love it.
All right. Yeah, hey man, you you went into vacation on a high note after those Cowboys last night. I mean, that was something. I still can't believe that's a team record for scoring. I would have thought that they had scored more than that in their illustrious history.
Agreed. That was a surprise. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, when it got to a double-digit lead, that's when I turned it off because I knew Indianapolis wasn't coming back. I didn't think they were going to explode in the fourth quarter like that, and props to them.
Well, they put up 54 on the Colts last night. Can they put up another 54 this week on the Houston Texans?
Whatever the over and under is, I would take the over. Wouldn't you, John Pitt?
Oh yeah, definitely take the over.
Yeah. Oh man, I have to laugh because I got to see what that opening line is on that game. Well, anyway, we got a whole lot to talk about tonight. I mean, the college football playoffs, the field is set there. We got to talk about Coach Prime going to Colorado. And hopefully lifting that program there. And, here in Louisville, the big talk today was a surprise at Scott Satterfield leaving to take the job at Cincinnati to fill the opening that was left when Luke Fickell went to Wisconsin. So, man, we got a whole bunch of stuff, and that's just NCAA football. We could talk about the Commanders and the Giants, Dallas, and of course, the World Cup is still going on, even though the U.S. isn't going on in it. So anyway, let's just get started. John, I'm just going to ask you, did the committee get it right with Georgia, Georgia, Michigan, TCU, and Ohio State in that order?
Gary, you and I had a couple conversations this weekend.
Mm-hmm.
They got it right. They did the right thing. And as I said, they did not do the money thing.
Exactly.
I really like the fact that it is Georgia, Michigan, TCU, Ohio State.
Mm-hmm.
What concerned me was I've been saying if TCU lost, I really believed they had to run the table. I really believed that. I really believe they also deserve to be in, but I know what the feeling is about the Big 12. And with them losing in overtime to Kansas State, it concerned me because when the committee gets together, and they'll never admit this, they will never admit it, but if Alabama had gotten in, you would have had Georgia, Alabama in one of the semifinals and Ohio State, Michigan in another semifinal. That is nothing but a cash cow money for a Final Four. Everybody would have loved it.
Yeah.
I'm glad that TCU got in. I'm glad they did the right thing. Now that we get into it, I think Georgia beats Ohio State, and I think Michigan beats TCU.
John, I couldn't agree with you more. Like you said, they got it right. I understand what Nick Saban was saying about, both of those losses were 3 points or something, were close losses. It doesn't matter to me because 2 losses are still 2 losses, and you just can't have a playoff with that. And like you said, if they had put Alabama in there, that was just nothing. To me, it would have looked like nothing but a money grab. I don't really know how many people would have paid attention to the playoff, to be quite honest, outside of Alabama, because I think one of the beauties of the playoff as it's set up now is, you've got your power schools in there, your typical powers, but it's nice to have a different school in there. Like last year, Cincinnati, which, of course, now has a new coach. Cincinnati was in there last year. Whether they had a chance or not, it was good to see somebody else come in. And for me, it was good to see a team from the group of five, as they call them, get in there. Now, of course, in 2 years, now that the playoffs have been expanded to 12 games, 12 teams, now you've got more teams in. The Power Five are going to, they're going to have their presence, but that second tier, that group of five, now they've got a shot, especially, again, if you're in the Big 12 and your champion now has a shot to get in, which I think is fine. I don't have a problem with the top four getting buys, but you want to see it as inclusive as possible. And this incoming setup, I think, works great. But for now, John, I agree with you on your picks. I'm an Ohio State fan. I'm glad that they got in. My view on them getting in has softened from a couple of weeks ago when Michigan just put it to them on their home field. But just looking at how things shook out, especially with the surprise that Utah pulled on USC Friday night, that I figured at that point Ohio State was in.
Yeah, can't knock it. I mean, both you and our guest last week, AP Stidham, both had it right. You called it. You both said, that TCU would get in, and I'm glad they are in. I really am glad. But I think, we'll see what happens in this playoff. I'm a big fan of Coach Khaki, so I'm rooting for the Maize and Blue. I want them to see how far they go, and maybe if they get a matchup with Georgia, maybe it won't be 34-11 this year. Maybe it'll be a little bit better, but we'll see. I really think Georgia will beat Ohio State. I just saw today that the wide receiver Smith in Jibba, he's declared for the NFL draft, so he's not eligible to play in this game. So we'll see what happens now. And we'll go from there. But I really think they got it right. I really am looking forward to this Final Four. And kudos to the competition, the College Football Playoff Committee. Kudos to them.
Yeah. The other big story this weekend, Deion Sanders has left Jackson State for Colorado. I think for Colorado, that was a great hire, especially given their recent history. And I think, John, you had mentioned before we went on that they've only had, 3 winning seasons in the last, 15, maybe 20 years?
20 years.
Yeah. I mean, it's like, wow. It's like Bill McCartney's not walking through that door. And I didn't know it was that bad. I mean, really, I did not know it was that bad for Colorado. So you've got to start somewhere. I'm going to reserve comment, because that's one of the schools. Jackson State was one of the schools that I covered, and Deion Sanders was there. And kudos to him for what he did for that program in 3 years, because you just didn't know. You talk about really starting from nothing and really building that program into HBCU power. You got to give him credit for that, and the attention that he's brought to HBCUs. I hope that the void that he left can be filled by somebody else, either on the field or, I'll say, in terms of profile and exposure and lifting it up. It's like, one thing I will say is that Sanders really has challenged HBCUs to do their job and show just how good they are on the field, and that it's a good product to watch on TV.
Well, congratulations to Coach Sanders. I'm happy for him. As I said before, and I've said many times, selfishly, and I got to stress, selfishly, I wanted him to stay at Jackson State. Totally selfish. But I totally understand how the situation works and how he's moved on. He deserves it. In 3 years, I think they were 26-5, if I'm not mistaken. Back to
27 and
back,
5. Yeah.
yeah, 27-5, back-to-back SWAC championships, back-to-back trips to the Celebration Bowl. Okay, I mean, what else? What else can be done? Now, what I will say, he has a blueprint, and a template that he has put together, and other coaches, other members of the SWAC or HBCUs will hopefully be able to follow that, Gary.
Mm-hmm. Indeed.
He has moved on, but his template is still there.
Yeah.
Hopefully, coaches at other institutions, other higher levels of learning in the HBCU will be able to take upon what they have seen, what Coach Sanders has done, and grow it from there. He did a great job. He brought a lot of attention, not only to Jackson State, but the SWAC. College Game Day came to Jackson, Mississippi. You know, you think about that. He had players, the number one recruit, the number one high school recruit, decided to not go to Florida State and come to Jackson State. This is the work of Deion Sanders. This is the work that he did. And I'm just proud of what he did. And I think he's going to be very successful at Colorado. As you said, they've had 3 winning seasons in the last 20 years, 1 10-win season in the last 20 years. I think that he will be very successful. I also told you and John Pitt before the show went on the air today, the next 2 seasons, he could win 7 games apiece in the next 2 seasons, and they're going to name the stadium after him. They're that far down, and he's going to bring them up. He's going to do a lot of things with that program at Colorado and take it to where it used to be. And I'll just say, great job, Deion Sanders, and good luck to you at Colorado.
One last thing before we move on to NFL. Scott Satterfield going to Cincinnati. I think it's a great hire for Cincinnati in terms of offense, because the offenses that he built at App State and what he's done at Louisville and turning them into one of the ACC's best offenses, and especially this turnaround. I mean, the one thing you can say about him, he goes out on a high note. They started off bad. They were 2-3, and they went 5-2 down the stretch, and they beat some really good teams. They beat Pitt, Wake Forest, and NC State, all of which were ranked this season. So he kind of goes out on top. And I think with that kind of offensive mind, I don't want to call him a savant, but he knows offense. And really, I think that helps Cincinnati, and it could help him in recruiting, especially in Ohio.
Well, I'll tell you this, it totally caught me by surprise today. I didn't see that coming from anywhere, any possible way. I think he will do well.
Before my first cup of coffee, man. I mean, that news came before I could pour my first cup of coffee, and I was like, "What?"
When you sent me the text, I'm like, "Why? What? Really? How? What happened?" But I think he will. You know, he deserves an opportunity. He's going to go to Cincy. He's got some big shoes to fill, because Fickle has done a wonderful job there, and Fickle's moving on to Wisconsin. So we'll see what's going to happen. We will see.
One last note, Deion Branch is going to be the interim coach for Louisville in their Fenway Bowl game against, you guessed it, Cincinnati. Talk about awkward.
Very.
Anyway, yeah. Hey, look, there was nothing awkward about that Giants-Commanders game yesterday from what I could see, and I was just following the crawl along the bottom of the screen. That game, you know, that outcome really didn't surprise me. Again, I didn't get a chance to see it because I was watching, of course, here in Louisville, we get Ravens games because of Lamar Jackson, and I was kind of into that game. We won't talk about Russell Wilson and the Broncos because, well, there's just nothing to talk about there. Of course, now, you know, we can talk about fact that Jackson is hurt and is probably done for the regular season. Hopefully they make the playoffs and he can come back then. But that's a big if at this point.
Well, it's unfortunate with Lamar Jackson. He got hurt yesterday, a knee injury. 10-9 win over Seattle. I mean, Seattle. Wow.
Denver. Denver. I know what you meant. Hey, old habits are hard to break, man, because I and myself.
That game was really rough to watch. We'll see what's going to happen. They're playing Hundley now. We'll see how far he can take them. But in regards to the Commanders and the Giants, 2020 tie is rough. The Giants really have a hard schedule coming up. They have to play the Eagles. I think they also have who else do they have on the schedule, Gary? I think they have Dallas still to play. And then they also got to come back here and play the Commanders.
Yeah.
So, and I think the Commanders, that game has been moved to prime time now. It's an 8:30 game on a Sunday night. Mm-hmm. And I think the Commanders are going to beat them on the next go-round. I don't know what it is, Gary. Don't know what it is, but that guy, Taylor Heineke, he started the game off in the first quarter. He great. Second and third, not so great. And then the fourth quarter, when they needed that drive to tie the game up, he pulled it out. He gets some benefit. He's gutsy. He's got a lot of heart, and they play hard around him, man. I just like the guy. I really do. I really do.
I'm becoming a believer in him in terms of what he can do for that team. Not as a game manager. He's just a resilient guy that wins games. And I think that's the important thing at this point. Anybody that expects him to be a Pro Bowler, that part's probably never going to happen. It's not going to be pretty. And I can't think of too many quarterbacks that are going to win long-term throwing for less than 200 yards a game. But having said that, the results are what they are. And I guess he's 6-1-1 or something like that.
5-1-1. 5-1-1.
That's right, 5-1-1. And you really can't argue with that. And he just gets something out of the team that resolve, determination, heart, and there's just no price tag on that, and it shows up in the standings. And again, Washington is 7-5-1 in last place, and there's still reason for hope in that division.
And just think, when I said they were going to get 9 years beginning of the season, you and Pitt laughed at me, and I think they're going to get 9 wins. I think they're going. They still have Cleveland left to play. They have the Giants left to play. San Francisco, Dallas. I can't think of who else. So I think they can get 9 wins out of that. I really do. And they're going to luck into one win. I really do think they're going to luck into one win. And there's one win that's going to be very surprising that they win going away. I don't know who it's going to be against, but again, I think that there's a potential there where they're just gonna do the impossible. Yeah. Well, biggest thing is next up is the Giants. Yesterday in the first half, they had to make adjustments. Again, Daniel Jones was looking like the second coming of Y.A. Tittle. He was just doing anything he wanted out there against the Commanders. It was just ridiculous. It was just ridiculous. They made
the old school reference. I think, and I agree with the sentiment. It's just every time you mention Y.A. Tittle, man, I just keep thinking about those old New York Giants, and when they're playing at Yankee Stadium, man. That's just old school.
Oh yeah, I mean Jones yesterday, he was running the run pass option. He's picking up yards. He's throwing spirals down the field. I mean, he's just looking. He was unbelievable. The second half, the Commanders made some adjustments. He was not as effective, and they're going to do the same thing next week. One of the things I noticed on a couple plays, and I'm not a football guy, but when you're playing against somebody like Daniel Jones, your defense, especially your defensive ends, have to stay in their lanes. You can't, if you go up and under, you better make sure you get the quarterback. And a couple times the Commanders went outside the lanes, tried to freelance a little bit and go up and under. Jones went outside of it, ran for 8 or 9 yards, sometimes 10 yards, pick up the first down. They adjusted in the second half. That didn't happen as much. But you just got to make sure you keep him in containment. You want to keep him right inside that box. You don't want him to get outside and start running. But with that being said, I think the Commanders beat them in 2 weeks, Gary. I think they do. And I'm going to give you a surprise now. Let the cat out the bag. We got a guest coming in next week to talk about the Commanders and the Giants game. You know who we got coming in next week?
Is that our New York Giants expert?
Yes, indeed. Eli White will be right here to talk about the Giants and to explain how, in his way, they'll beat the Commanders. I don't think I'll agree with that, but I can't wait, man. I cannot wait.
Neither can I. Let's talk about those Dallas Cowboys.
How about those Cowboys?
I'm telling you, you got to give props. What does that say? Game recognized game and all that stuff. But that was an impressive. That game turned. It went from a competitive game to a laugher for the Cowboys, and that's the thing. I think that might be the scariest prospect for the division to keep in mind. And yes, Philadelphia, I think you've got reason to be nervous because that showed a killer instinct. Granted, they beat a team they're supposed to beat, but watching them pour that on again, I watched it up until it became a double-digit lead, and I figured the game was done at that point. But then when I saw the final score, and I'm serious, my eyes just bugged out because I was like, how did it go from something like 28 or something to 54 points? And that fourth quarter, guys, they just stepped on the gas.
Well, I'm scared to ask Pitt, and I'm scared to even ask my son Dante. I'm quite sure right now Dak Prescott is a top 10 quarterback in their mind right now because they beat the Indianapolis Colts. They beat the brakes off the Indianapolis Colts. But I know Pitt's not going to say anything about it. That's fine. But they won. They beat the Colts. They only can beat who you put in front of them. Gary, the time to prove things with the Dallas Cowboys is not now, but what will they do in the playoffs, my friend? What will they do in the playoffs?
Oh yeah, I mean, that's the proving point for any team, including the Philadelphia Eagles. But
Gary, I got a question for you.
Okay.
Do you have one of these?
What is that?
That's a handkerchief. What I want you to do is make sure you get one. Have it ready for the playoffs because John Pitt will be crying and Dante will be crying. So make sure you have a handkerchief ready so we can wipe their brow and wipe the tears away for another disappointing season that Dallas will have.
That is so wrong. That is so wrong, especially for our producer that we always say can put horns on us, okay? Let's give him a little bit of credit. John, I don't know who owns that dog of yours that I see, your grand doggy, but they might withhold that dog's company from you after saying that. Oh man. Hey, John, John is staying respectfully silent, but I know he's got to have something to say. Please, John, chime in.
He won't.
Oh. Man, oh man, that was rough. I don't even know what to say after that.
Well, I guess we segue into the World Cup now, Gary.
I don't know. There's probably some more NFL that we need to talk about. I guess what was the biggest surprise of the weekend for you?
biggest surprise of the weekend, I wouldn't say surprise, I'd say disappointment. Jimmy G getting injured. That was a disappointment. I think he's, done with everything he's supposed to do. Now, the thing is with the backup Purdy, how far do you go with him? I've heard murmurs, I've heard rumblings that San Francisco should go now and sign Baker Mayfield. I don't know how that would really work. I think I just don't.
Not at this point.
I don't know about it. Yeah,
No,
I don't know
no.
about that.
Not
I
at
tell you
this
one.
point.
I tell you the most exciting thing I saw this weekend in the NFL. That was Kansas City and Cincinnati. That was a great football.
Yeah. Now
I
that was the other game I watched. I think I've posted about this earlier. Here in Bengals country, they're a very intriguing team to watch. They really are fun to watch because as good as they looked yesterday, as determined as they looked yesterday, and that's about the only thing I could really say. That team just did not flinch when they were trailing, and basically, that's the only team that I've seen that really has Kansas City on their heels, even when they're ahead, feeling like they're on their back on their heels, even when they're ahead. It's like there's a certain nervousness, and I don't know if it comes from losing in the AFC title game last year, but there's just something about this team and Joe Burrow that I really like, and I guess, like I said, he's just a guy much like Taylor Heineke, who just gets it done. And of course, he's got the stats, which Heineke doesn't. They're just a fun team to watch.
They've beaten Kansas City the last 3 times.
Now, every time I look at that stat, I'm like, my gosh, they're beating Kansas City pretty much at the height of Patrick Mahomes's career. I mean, I do think he is in his prime years right now, and there's probably another Super Bowl in him somewhere. But my goodness, man, if you have to go through Cincinnati, if you have to face Cincinnati, it's not easy. And I think the rest of the teams in that league really, or in that conference rather, need to look at the fact that Cincinnati is a player. I think everybody in the AFC North is looking up at them right now, if not literally, then figuratively, because they really do look good right now. They're just playing with a confidence that I didn't think I was going to see, especially when they got off to that bad start.
They're playing really well, and they're a matchup nightmare for every team in the league, not just Kansas City. When you line up and you see Jamar Chase coming at you, what's the other guy's name? Higgins?
Yeah.
Yeah, and then what other guy? And then you look in the backfield, and they got P. Ryan and they got Mixon. I mean, they're really a good team. I think right now they're playing very well, and they're catching their momentum at the right time, because in that Central, Cleveland is not going to go any much further. The Ravens are really struggling now with injuries and losing games they shouldn't, all the season long, losing games they shouldn't lose. And the Steelers, this is just an off year for the Steelers. So I think Cincinnati is getting ready to make their run right now. And they're dangerous, man. They are, and they don't care if they got to go on the road. Proved it last year. They went at Tennessee and won. Then they went in Kansas City and won. And I think they can go in Buffalo and give them problems too. So
yeah,
we'll see. We'll see.
That's a team playing with house money, and I guess I could just pretty much leave it at that.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So, John, how much World Cup have you paid attention to?
Well, I was disappointed. U.S. went down Saturday to the Netherlands, but there's no shame in that. The Netherlands team has a 19-game unbeaten streak. They're a tough team, very tough team. But the U.S. coach made some comments after the game. He was very disappointed in his defense. Very disappointed in the defense. They didn't play well. Thought they made some mental errors. And the goal right before half, Gary, last play of the first half and they give a goal up to go down 2-0 at half. That's a backbreaker. That can't happen. That just can't happen. They're young. As Jim Bell said last week, this is not the year for them. You wanted them to win, but you're looking at the next World Cup with these kids and getting this experience underneath their belt and them being unbelievable in the next World Cup. So, I'm happy for them. They got to the knockout round. We'll see what happens from there. We'll see what happens.
Yeah. I think the one thing, if you're the U.S. and you look at the film, so to speak, from that game, and you'll see how the Netherlands is just probably one of the most athletic, or I'll just say one of the fastest, most in shape teams I've seen. And I think that's it. I think they did wear down that defense a little bit toward the end of the first half and caught them in a lull. But their athleticism, oh my gosh. What people really don't understand about football players is their athleticism, is their level of conditioning. They might be some of the best pure athletes on the planet. And nobody will admit that. I always say that probably the two best types of athletes that I've seen are soccer players and hockey players, especially hockey players. To go at that speed, to show that kind of athleticism, for 60 minutes, going almost 30 miles an hour down the ice is impressive. But say whatever about all the flopping in the World Cup, but they are still very well tuned. And the Netherlands was a great example. That's a team I'm not ready to pick them just yet as the favorite from now, because as long as Brazil is in the field, that's a team that has to be reckoned with at any point. France as well is another team that quietly, maybe not so quietly, I'll change that, is showing why they're a power. And that game versus England, that game, that could really be a telling matchup.
Well, you got some good matchups coming up. You got the Netherlands and Argentina. We already know who John Pitt's going with. He's going with Argentina, so we'll see what happens there. You got Brazil playing Croatia. Croatia played a game today. I think it was against Japan. Had to go to penalty kicks, and they got the penalty kick win with 3-1. So we'll see how that goes with Brazil and Croatia. I think right now Brazil is the team to beat. I mean, they are just, they're tough. I mean, they beat South Korea today 4-1. So, we'll see what's going to happen. I'm excited. I'm looking forward to watching. You got some games tomorrow morning I'm going to check out. So I'm ready, my friend.
Yeah. The thing everybody says about the World Cup is that nobody pays attention after the U.S. gets knocked out. I really don't buy that, because, the audiences for, say, UEFA, Bundesliga, Champions League, things like that, in non-World Cup years, there's a reason why these games are being shown in the United States. And it's not just because of, the foreign interests, it's because there are a lot of followers here. I mean, you mentioned Man U, you mentioned, Lionel Messi, anybody like that. You want to see the best players. So I don't think that, the audience might fall off just because, we like to see the ball go in the net in bunches. You're not going to see that. But if you want to watch a sport and appreciate it for just as pure athleticism and strategy, and yes, there is pinpoint strategy in soccer, which I've always appreciated, from having covered two World Cups, that, a 2-0 game could be, considered, critical, almost a blowout, but only because it takes a lot of work to get that 2-0 lead, or to just get a 2-goal lead, period, because goals really are hard to come by.
You're right, man. And this year has been incredibly hard. You've had some very exciting games. You had last week. I told you was 16 of the 34 last week had scoreless first halves. Hey, man. But, again, another wonderful week in sports, Gary. Another wonderful week in sports and the fastest 30 minutes in town.
Yeah, it's been fun. I keep thinking about that Bengals Chiefs game and thinking that coming off, what was the game the week before, or maybe 2 weeks ago, that Vikings Bills game. I didn't think anything was really gonna top that in terms of excitement and intrigue, but that was a fun game to watch. In fact, that's one of those games that I might look at the NFL Network and look at the replay because I didn't really get a chance to enjoy that, because I was chasing down bowl stuff. That's like I said, that we're in that time of year. For me, football season really starts like in November when you've got 3:30 games in college football and 4:00 games in the NFL. That's prime time to me. The 1:00 games, unless it's really a big matchup, is just an appetizer for those 4:00 games. And that's when you are sitting in front and eating snacks and everything and talking trash. And I know, John Webster, you are talking trash, especially if your sons are there and the Dallas Cowboys are playing. Am I right?
Hey, man, you got to do what you got to do, man. You got to do what you got to do.
All right, just don't tick off your wife and everything, getting on your son's case, because you know how protective she is of JR and Dante.
Hey, Gary, take us home, man. Take us home.
All right, folks. There's plenty of sports to watch. College basketball. We've got plenty of good matchups. We didn't even get a chance to talk about Notre Dame and UConn women yesterday, which again, another game that I watched, and Notre Dame really showed how good they are. That guard, Olivia Miles, I was a fan of hers as a freshman. I think she's got a good chance to be ACC Player of the Year. She is fun to watch, and she is a baller. I mean, a flat-out baller. Keep in mind, her first game in the NCAA tournament, she had a triple-double, and I think she was the first male or female, the first player, male or female, to have that in an NCAA debut game. That's telling you something. And again, that was a game in which she's scratching the surface of her ability. So, keep an eye on her, but watch sports, folks. Come back, see us next week. Tell your friends, tell your family. We are here. We love to talk sports. Send us your questions on Facebook. Until then, take care, be safe out there, and we are out.
Take care, everybody. See you next week.